That was amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing all your expertise on the cats of the world. Today, that was, really interesting learning about the tiger cat and the interactions with the local dogs and the disease transfer. Can you talk a little bit about how disease spreads between the two species and how, if the tiger cats get the parvovirus and what that all looks like?
It's like when we did the monitoring part, we noticed that at 80% of the cameras that were taking pictures of the tiger cats, there were also pictures of dogs, which means that they are both using the same area. And you don't need them to be one next to the other right at the same time, because once the dog uses the area, the virus stays there. And it's like whether the tiger cat shows up a day or two later or whatever, it's still gonna be there. So that's how the virus transmits. And I learned that because at the time I was at São Paulo Zoo, and there was a COVID, actually COVID virus that spread from the domestic cats from there into the wild, and they had like a bamboo fence protecting, keeping one after the other, but it was still there. So it's not hard. It's pretty easy actually. They are using the same area. The virus is there. Once there's tiger cats or any other carnivore shows up, they get it. And what we determined that was really scary is that 80% of the dogs do have the parvovirus. That
Interesting.
was like that freaked out.
Yeah, that's
That freaked me out because I'm not parvo. I mean canine distemper, which is actually worse. I mean distemper virus. And at the vaccination, it's like when we were doing like the first round of vaccinations, there was a cat there like showing like all the symptoms that that's really sad. And this dog, I mean not a cat, this dog ended up dying after we left. So the virus is there. And that dog was less than 2 kilometers away from our monitoring site. So it's
mhm,
like they're exposed to it. And that's
yeah.
why we decided to do vaccinations, because that's the only way, to to mitigate the threat. And it is let's say, clear and present danger. I mean, it's
Yeah,
really, really big. And
yeah.
we needed to do that. Even before we get the confirmation, we set up the vaccination program to mitigate the threat.
Yeah, it's definitely a common problem worldwide and something I know a lot of conservationists are working
Yeah,
on is
yeah.
that
And the
disease.
thing is, it's like it's an unseen problem because you actually don't notice. Why did we get our attention? Because when we saw pictures of the dogs on camera, they looked like they had diseases. They didn't look healthy. They showed like a lot of skin problems. And we said, there's something going on here. And then the vet from the team at the time, actually Jim was there when we noticed this. She said there was a dog with symptoms of canine distemper. And that raised the alarm immediately.
Yeah,
And after that, I
yeah.
said, well, next step is just to do vaccination because we couldn't do it at the time because we didn't have any money for that. And then we decided to do vaccinations even before we confirmed from the labs that was actually distemper. Parvo is
Yeah.
smaller, but distemper it's widespread everywhere.
It's such a challenging one. Jim, we've got some questions about some of the other projects you've got going on as well. Are there any plans to set up conservation projects for flat-headed cats or the Bornean bay cat?
Those are the two most poorly funded small cap programs in the world. There are a few conservation projects, but mostly there are a lot of research projects going on that are not dealing with threat mitigation. So we have two projects in Borneo on all 5 Bornean species of cats: flat-headed cat, bay cat, clouded leopard, marble cat, and of course the leopard cat, which is the only species of cat on the planet that's doing well because of oil palm. But much more needs to be done. And we just located a place in peninsular Malaysia that has flat-headed cats. So now we're looking at the threats to flat-headed cats there and a program to mitigate, a project to mitigate those threats. But much more needs to be done for bay cat and flat-headed cat.
Okay, interesting. So back over to today, what sort of resources are you all looking for? What do you need to keep your project in the field, to keep your students learning? What's going to be most helpful to you?
Well, it's like one thing for sure. As I said in the presentation, the ultimate goal is to have a continuous threat mitigation program set in Mirador, to have Mirador State Park as an insurance policy against tiger cats extinction, because the population there is viable if we can manage to cut the disease problem out of the equation. Because even if the diseases are in a moderate level, the population wipes out. So it's like, for that, you have to do vaccinations every year. Otherwise, the threat gets back in immediately. So it all depends on how far can we go, because the park is really big. It is 5,000 square kilometers, which is huge. It's huge for American standards, because you don't have much, that many conservation.
It's 1 million acres, I think.
Yeah, 5 million acres. I mean,
1 million.
1 million.
Yeah, baby. I always mix up
big. It's big.
with that. And
it's hard.
It's like, in the population that lives within the park, they are so poor. I mean, we got really close contact with them because we had to go to their houses to have their dogs vaccinated. And I mean, it's heartbreaking to see, their poor conditions of living. So it's like, something that I want to do is like try to find way for them, instead of using the local wildlife for protein sources or raising pigs in there, because the pigs go outside and they damage the environment. Actually. And
So,
what we wanted to do is like to change that practice with beekeeping, natural honey production, to see that, because that could be a viable source of income for them, that could actually have a lot of benefits for them. And but for that, there would, there's a lot of investment that will need to be done. It all depends on how far can we go, because with this amount of money you can do this, with that amount of money you can do much more. It all depends on that. I mean, the park is too big. We are concentrated in one part only, because we don't have stuff to go everywhere. But the idea is to have all the park shielded against diseases, and doing that as well. And we are getting farmers that have properties next to the park. They're joining us. We already got one, and he's trying to get the other farmers to have their legal protected areas, because Brazilian law requires that for the savannas, for the cerrado, you must have 35% of your area set as a reserve. And they're trying to get all those preserves in one block, and that block connected to the park, so that we can have corridors. So it's like, it's a long-term thing. It's not gonna happen like from one day, from one year to the other, but it's like, this is something that we have to endure.
It's a lot of work.
Yep.
A lot of work going forward. We're just one last question for Jim. What sort of role does Small Cat Foundation play in funding with the various projects, and how do you support those efforts?
Well, I work with about 32 people around the world, all working on small wild cats, and I try to visit their projects at least once a year. I don't get to all of them all the time, but we're back and forth all the time on Zoom now, talking all the time about strategies and what to do, and who needs what funding, and who needs to send what proposal to what organization. Reviewing proposals. My colleagues also help review their colleagues' proposals. So we try to have a very closely knit group, and we try to have meetings every few years to bring everybody together. I anticipate our next meeting will be in mid-2022 in Singapore. where we'll have all the small cap people in the world all working together.
That's great. That's going to be a lively bunch for sure. So I want to just say thank you again to everyone for joining us to learn about the great work of small cats, great work for small cats being done by Jim and Tadeu. We'll now be heading on a stage break for the next 30 minutes or rather 20 minutes, and then we'll return here at a quarter after. Here on the main stage, you'll learn about penguins and then sharks and rays. On the all access stage will be the final roundtable presentation, When Women Succeed, Wildlife Wins. For now, I encourage you to go visit the conservationists in the exhibitor area and make sure you get your selfies added to the photo booth. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank
Thanks, Jim.
you.